Hi there, welcome to Techopsworld. This is Vijay Selvam. In this JEST Angular crash course, we are going to learn complete JEST tutorial specially made for Angular. We will learn what is JEST, why do we need JEST, how to configure JEST in Angular project and remove Karma Jasmine from Angular project. We will also learn how JEST uses matches. We will also learn asynchronous testing services, components and observables and also the timers, and we will also see how to cover branches and do 100% unit test case coverage for statements, branches, functions and lines for the whole project. Until now, if you have not subscribed to our channel, please subscribe and support us. This will motivate us to put more content and help this channel to grow, and I'm happy to share all the knowledge I had and going through in my career. Now let's jump into the course. What is JEST framework? JEST is a delightful JavaScript testing framework with a focus on simplicity, and it's an open source testing framework completely built on JavaScript, and it's designed majorly to work with React and React based native applications, but it also works with the projects using Babel, TypeScript, Node, React, Angular, Vue and many more. In this tutorial, we are going to see completely how to use JEST in Angular. Why JEST framework is better for JavaScript testing? So there are many other frameworks available for testing. Then why JEST is better? Let's see what makes JEST powerful. These are the points that makes JEST more powerful for JavaScript testing. First, it's zero config. JEST aims to work out of the box, config free on most of the JavaScript projects. The next is snapshots. Snapshot testing is great. It lets you to capture a string that represents your rendered component and store it in a file. Then you can compare it later to ensure that UI didn't change. And we can also say it's make test which keep track of larger objects with ease. Snapshots live either alongside your test or embedded inline. The next point is it's isolated. Tests are parallelized by running them in their own process to maximize the performance. The next point is a great API. From it to expect, JEST has the entire toolkit in one place. The next point is JEST is very fast and it is also very safe. What makes JEST is so fast? So basically there are two things that makes JEST very fast. The first one is a parallelization. This is pretty obvious and other test frameworks use it too. And the next point is to make things quick, JEST runs previously failed test first, and also it runs the slowest test first. This ensures that all cores are utilized to the max. That is why JEST is very fast and it's safe. The next is a code coverage. JEST can generate code coverage just by adding the flag ---- coverage. You don't need to do any additional setup. JEST can collect code coverage information from the entire project, including the untested files as well. The next is easy mocking. JEST uses a custom resolver for imports in your test, making it simple to mock any object outside of your test scope. You can use mocked imports with the rich mock functions API to spy on function calls with readable test syntax. The next is JEST supports great exceptions. When the test fails, JEST provides rich context, like what is expected and what is received. All those informations are clearly maintained. Now let's create an Angular project. ng new JEST Angular. Okay, now we have our Angular project has been created. Now let's navigate into JEST Angular. Okay, so now we are in the folder JEST Angular. Now we have our Angular project ready, but this project has Karma Jasmine as testing framework. But we are going to configure JEST as a testing framework. So for that, we have to remove the Karma Jasmine and we have to configure JEST. So first we will remove the Karma Jasmine. So now let's see what are the steps to configure JEST in Angular project. Steps to configure Angular project. Steps to configure JEST in Angular project. Okay, so now these are the steps. I have all the steps defined here. So totally 8 steps we are going to do. We'll go one by one. The first step is to delete or remove Karma Jasmine in our Angular project. If you have an existing Angular project, you have to remove what are the packages you have used for the Karma Jasmine testing framework. Have to remove all those packages. This is your new Angular project. We will see what are the packages are used by Karma Jasmine. So to see that, go to package.json. Here, whatever the packages which is mentioned as Karma or Jasmine, you have to remove that. These are the packages which is used by Karma Jasmine testing framework. Let me type all those things. Okay, I have typed all the packages here. So what are the packages? So here types Jasmine and Jasmine Core, Karma Chrome Launcher, Coverage, Karma Jasmine HTML Reporter. These are the packages which is used by Karma Jasmine testing framework. Let's remove all those packages. Press enter. This will remove these packages from this Angular project. If you have used any other packages which is used for the Karma Jasmine, then remove those packages as well. Okay, now we have removed Karma Jasmine. We could see the package.json. The Karma and Jasmine has been removed. Let's see the next step. So now the next step is to remove the test object from the angular.json file. So we have the angular.json file here. Let us open it. Go till the end. Let me minimize this terminal. Okay, so here we have the test object. By default, Angular, whenever you run npm run test, it will execute this script from the angular.json file. This is written for Karma Jasmine, but we are configuring JEST, so we don't need this test object. So let's remove this test object. Okay, delete it and save it. Okay, next. So now the next step is to delete the karma.conf.js file and the test.ts file. These are the files written for Karma Jasmine testing framework. So we don't need these two files. We will remove these two files. And you can see the test file, it's inside the src folder. Okay, now I have removed these two files. Now let's install JEST in our Angular project. So to install JEST, type npm install JEST at types /JEST preset -Angular. So we require these three packages for running JEST in our Angular project. Okay, now we have installed a JEST in Angular project. Let's clean the terminal. Okay, so now the next step is to create a setup.jest.ts file. It's similar to karma.conf.js file. So we will create this file. You have to create the setup.jest.ts file inside src folder. Let's create it inside setup.jest.ts. And here inside this file we have to import a JEST preset Angular. So type import JEST preset Angular from setup JEST. Put the semicolon and save it. So now we have our JEST file has been created. Okay, now we have imported a JEST preset Angular. Now let's move on to the next step. Now the next step is to update the tsconfig.spec.json file. So we have the spec file here. So here instead of Jasmine, we have to mention JEST and a node. So we will type JEST and node. And here we have this test.ts file already removed. So here instead of this file, we have to point setup.jest.ts file. So since it's already inside the src folder, so we are just changing the test.ts. Then let's save it. Okay, now let's move on to the next step. So here the next step is to add the configuration in the package.json. So we will open the package.json file. At the end of this package.json, we can write our configuration, or you can even keep it in the separate file as well. I have the configuration already written. Let me copy it. So this is the just a configuration we need to mention in the package.json. Here we are referring the just a preset Angular package and the setup.jest.ts file where we have imported the just preset Angular, and the path we wanted to ignore. So we don't want to do unit test case coverage for this package. So we will remove these packages. So to remove that, we have to add it in the ignore patterns. Here in this line, we are pointing the tsconfig spec.json file where we have mentioned our jest and node and also pointed our setup.jsts file. So we have to mention that here. So this is the just a configuration we have to do. Then let's save it. So the next is we have only the last step pending, that is to add the scripts in the package.json. So go to the top, and here instead of ng test, we have to add jest here. So let me remove the ng test. We don't use ng test anymore. We will be using jest. So type jest. So whenever you run npm run test, it will execute jest. Then we will also add the watch mode. Test:watch. So whenever you mention npm run test:watch, it will execute the jest in watch mode. For that, you need to mention a flag called watch, --watch. This will keep the test running. So if you make any changes, it will automatically rerun the file. Now let's add another script called coverage. This will generate a coverage report, a neat and nice report for us. So this is completely handled by jest. We just need to give a flag. We don't need to do any configuration for this. So test:coverage. Then just same like --watch, you have to give coverage. So this will give a coverage report for us. So that's all about the configuration what we have to do for the Angular project. So now we have completely removed Karma Jasmine and we have our jest has been configured. Now let us test this application whether we have our jest configuration is successful or not. So to test that, let us run this application first. The test cases. So npm run test. This will execute the test whatever this application has. By default, whenever I create a new project, this will default create a spec file for us. If you see here, we have the spec file here. So that is covering the app.component.ts file. Let us run the test. So here it is executing the script test. So this is calling jest. So this is the one it is mentioning. So here if you could see, we have only one spec file, app.component.spec.ts, that is referring for the app component.ts. So jest is testing that file. Okay, so now we could see the test has been passed, which means we have successfully configured jest in Angular project. In this chapter, we will see how jest uses matches to test your values in different ways. So we will see all the commonly used matches. Let's jump in. we will create a component named matches and we will see all the matches from that component. Okay, let's create a component. Ng generate component matches. Okay, we have the component created, so it's named as matches. Let me clear this. Okay, so this will have all the specs defined default. If you run this, it will not throw any error. Okay, npm run test. Okay, so our test got passed, so which means our application is clean now. We don't have any issues. Let's start learning the matches. First, the simplest way to test a value is with exact equality. So for that, we need to use to be. So first, let us create an it. Two plus two. Let's check with a number, adding number. It's 4. So we are going to test whether 2 plus 2 is 4 or not. For that, expect 2 plus 2, then dot to be. So this will test the exact equality. See, checks the value is what you expect. This is uses object.is to check the strict equality. But for floating point numbers, we should not use to be. We should use a close to or something else. Okay, so now we'll check whether it is 4 or not. Okay, so now we will run our application in the watch mode for the testing. Okay, npm run test :watch. This is what we have defined in the script. If you see in our package.json, we have test.watch, test:watch. So that is what I am running. This is executing our JEST in watch mode. So this is for exact equality. Okay, we have our application running in the watch mode. The JEST cases are running in the watch mode now. Okay, so now, to test the exact equality, we need to use dot to be. To test the values, we can use to equal. Okay, so let's check object values. I have a variable named const data. Here I'll name it as Techopsworld. Now we will expect this data dot to equal Techopsworld. We'll save it. Okay, so this has been passed. Now let's see if you change it to be, what happens. Save it. As expected, we got the test failure. This is because we have used to be. To be should always be used when you want to test the exact equality. Here we are using object. So here to test object, always use to equal. So when we change it to equal, the test will get pass. Change it to equal. Save it. Yes, we could see the test got passed. In general, to equal recursively checks every field of an object. It doesn't check the complete matches. It will check for each field in an object or else each value in an array. So that is how to equal works. Object testing. Now let's see truthiness. So in test, sometimes you need to distinguish between different values of a variable. For example, undefined, null, or false. So then how do we use matches for those? Let's see all the matches for the truthiness. I have the truthiness already written. Let me copy that code. So here it is. So here, don't think like you are testing a value from this it. Always it will be referring to the component. For example, you need to test like component dot and then the name of the variable, whatever other methods you are trying. Okay, so here let us save it. Here the value of n is null. So for the to check the null, we have to use to be null. So this will test whether the value of n is null or not. But this is defined, right? The n has value. So which means to be defined. This is also we can test whether the value is defined or not. We can test like that. And this is not undefined or something because we have already defined the value with null value. So in this case, I am negating the undefined. So this is not undefined, right? So in this case, and here it's not to be truthy because null is a false case, but it's again a value, but it's a falsy case. So that's why it's not truthy. Okay, and to be falsy, yes, it is to be falsy. This is what we have tested here, and we got all the cases has been passed. For the null cases has been passed. But if you want to check whether this value is undefined or not, if you remove this and save, this will be, because this is defined, you will face a error, you will get a failure. And also whether if it is truthy, if you remove these two, let us try this. I have saved it. Okay, we have got the failure. Received null, but it's expecting it's to be undefined. So since it's a different value, but if you change it, this value to undefined, the time this will get pass because this is a undefined. To be undefined will pass in this case, but it will make these expectations get failure. This one. Okay, let's revert this and save it. Okay, now let's see this one. I have assigned a value 0 to z. So in this case, I'm checking whether it is not null or not. Here 0 is a falsy value, but it is not a null. So in this case, I'm expecting it is not to be null. Yes, that is true, right? So this case will get passed, and we have defined the value for the z. So in that case, this also gets passed. And whether it is undefined, no, this is not undefined. That is the case also will get passed. And here we are checking whether it is not to be truthy. Yes, this is not truthy because 0 is a falsy value, and to be falsy also a falsy because this is 0, right? This is a falsy case. So all this will get passed. Now let's see how to use matches for numbers. I have already written for the numbers. Let me copy that. Let's save it. Here, expect like we have a variable inside in our component, and that value is 4. So here we are expecting whether the value is to be greater than 3 or not. Yeah, this is greater than 3 because it is 4, and this expectation will get passed. And here we are checking whether it is greater than or equal to 3.5. Yeah, this is greater than or equal to 3.5 because 4 is a value, right? And this is greater than 3.5. So we have two options to check for the greater. One with greater than or equal, or another one with a greater than. It's so the operators, right? Greater than or equal to. So it is the same for less than or equal to. So this is how you test a number which is greater than or less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. To test the exact equality, you need to use to be or to equal. Here both are equivalent for numbers. When it comes to object, that time to be and to equal are not same. You have to use to be for if you are checking for a string value, then you can use it to be and to equal also. You can test. You can use both. But when it comes to object, always go with to equal. So this is how we test for integers. When it comes to floating point numbers, we can't use to be or to equal to test an exact equality. But here the floating point numbers, we can use something like to be close to. Because this is not 0.3, this will be like a 0.3333 something will come. So for that, always use to be close to for floating point numbers. When you check with this value, it will throw an error. So that's why I have commented here. And we can see our two test cases has been passed for the numbers. Now let's see for strings. For strings, if you want to check a value which contains any letters or something, you can test something like that. To match, this checks a string matches with a regular expression. Here this is the regular expression. I am checking whether this Techops contains D or not. Here I am also checking it is not to match because it doesn't have any value. So I am making the test cases pass. So here this Techops doesn't match with a D. But whereas if you see here Techopsworld, here to match world, I am checking whether this Techopsworld contains a word world. So it contains the word, so it is passing. So that is why we have both the cases has been passed for the strings. Now let's see arrays and iterables. Here I have defined a variable called shopping list. So this will assume like this is a variable present in our component, and we are going to test that variable whether it contains a value called milk. So here I am expecting this shopping list to contain milk. If it contains the milk, the test will get pass. If it doesn't, then it will get fail. Then we are creating a new set out of this array list. So here we are created a new set, and in that set we are checking whether it has milk or not. Again, this will get passed. This is how you test arrays and iterables. Okay, we have our test case has been passed. We can see here. Now let's see the exceptions. How to handle exceptions in JEST. To test exceptions, first we will create a method inside our component. So here in the matches component, I am creating a method. So here in this method, I am throwing a new error with a new message. Let's save this. Let's go to the matches component spec file. Let me copy the test case I have written for the exceptions. So here, to test a particular function which throws an error, always use a dot to throw method. So this is what you have to use to check whether the method is throwing an error or not. Make sure the function which throws error always wrapped up with a function. Here, this compile Android code has been wrapped up with the arrow function. Otherwise, you will end up in getting the test case failure. Let's save this. So here at the first line, we are checking whether it is throwing any error or not. In this test case, we have 4 scenarios has been covered. The first scenario is whether this method is throwing or not. If we could see, we have the throw class mentioned here. So this scenario gets passed, and the next scenario we are checking whether it is throwing the error or not. So this is the error we have mentioned here, the error. So it is throwing the error, that is also gets passed. And in the third scenario, we are expecting the exact message. Here I have mentioned you are using old Angular. You are using old Angular. So it is expecting whether that method is throwing this message or not. And also we can use the regular expression with that message. I'm checking whether the Angular is present in that message or not. So you can do any ways to test a method, whether it is throwing any error or any error object or whatever the strings it is throwing. You can test all the scenarios. So this is how you handle exceptions in JEST. Now in this video we are going to see how to test services in Angular project using JEST. We will see get call, post call, and we will also see the coverage report generated for that. Let's jump in. First let me create a service. For that ng generate service, and we will create it under folder services. Then I am creating a service named fake service fake. Okay, we have created the service. It will be inside the app folder. Just collapse and expand again. Okay, we have the services created. So here it is. Let us open the service. So right now the service is empty. We don't have any method calls here. So let us create a method call first. I'll create a get call. Get data version 1. Okay, so this will return observables. So we will mention observable type, and you can give the type of the response. I'm just typing any. In your case it will be in your API response structure. Okay, so here I will give a URL. I'm going to use a JSON placeholder API URL, which is a fake URL, which you can hit and get any response. So I'll copy paste that. So this is the URL. When you hit this URL, you will get some dummy records. Okay, and I'm returning this dot. So here we need to make a HTTP call. For that we need to inject HTTP client into our service. First we'll inject a HTTP client. HTTP client. Okay, so here we'll import this. Okay, so in our system it doesn't show that auto import feature, which means we have not imported this in the module. I'll import HTTP client module. Okay, we have mentioned the imports. In some cases it will be auto imported. If yours is not auto import, then type the import HTTP client module from @Angular common HTTP semicolon. Let's save it. Okay, now our errors are gone. Okay, here now we can import this model. Like you could see that quick fix is now showing. Okay, we have imported it, or you can manually type also. Then we will trigger the get request. This dot HTTP dot get. Here we are going to pass the URL. Okay, so this is a simple get request. We are just calling this URL and getting the response. It's a JSON response. So we have mentioned observable response type here. We will test this method now. Here they have written the default test cases using the test bed approach. There are two types of approach. One is using the test bed, another is using the constructor approach. We will see the constructor approach first, then later we will see the test bed approach. We'll remove this. Okay, nothing else, just removing this test bed, that's enough, and remove the test bed imports. Okay, now we are good to go. Now let's create a service. So now we are creating a service instance here, fake service, and here we need to inject a HTTP client here. So whatever the services you have injected, you need to import all those things, dependencies here. So for that, first we will create a mock for that. So now we are testing only this service. So we don't want to test HTTP client or anything else. So we will directly use a mock functions for this. So whatever the services you write here, always use mock. So we are going to test only fake service, not nothing else. So we will write test cases only for that, and the remaining things should be mocked. Okay, now let HTTP client spy. So this is the mock and we are setting it as type any. So this one we will pass it here. Yes, so we have created a variable HTTP client spy and we have passed it to our fake service. So which since we have only one dependency, then this will assume that we are passing this one. Okay, but it doesn't know whether this HTTP client spy has methods like the get one or the post one, whatever you have created. But for that we need to inform. So for that we need to inform the HTTP client spy has get and post methods. For that we will write HTTP client spy equal to, and we'll create it as an object. In this object we have one method named get. So this is what we have used in our service file. Then, and the way to mock functions in JEST is jest.fn. So this will create a mock for the get call. Okay, now we have created a mock for the HTTP client. Let's save it. Okay, now we have created the variables what we wanted for service and then HTTP client spy. Now we will test the method. Let's write a it case should return. Okay, should test get data v1. Okay, okay, so here we are going to test this method get data v1. So here this method doesn't take any input parameters. It just trigger a method call http.getCall by passing the URL, nothing else. It doesn't pass any HTTP options or not even any. It's not a post call, right? We don't need to pass any post calls, but the query params, it doesn't have any query params or nothing. Okay, so we are just calling the get and by passing the URL. So we will test whether this method is triggering the HTTP get call by passing this URL. So we will test that one. So since this is a get call, this will return some data. So first we will create a expected records and we will mock this HTTP get with that record. I'm creating a response as a string Techopsworld. Here I am going to create a URL const URL and the URL which we have defined here. So we want to test, right, whether this is the URL is getting triggered or not. Okay, I have two things now, and then let us mock the function just.spy on. So this is how you mock any function. So here we are going to mock http dot get call. So http client spy comma the get. So we have only one method here, get. So we are marking that one, and it should return a observable response. So mock return value. So here you can set like normal response, but our method will return observable response. To make it observable, wrap it with of operator. This is an operator from RxJS. You can do the quick fix. So you have to import it from the RxJS. Okay, so it is imported from the RxJS. Now this HTTP client dot get call returns a observable response. Okay, so we have everything ready. Now we will trigger the method service dot whatever the methods present in our service will be displayed here. You can select that, and we are not passing any value to the method. So that's it. This is how you trigger a method in the service. Okay, now we will expect HTTP client spy dot get is called or not. Okay, dot to be called. We can also check how many times it has been called. So by our implementation, it should get triggered only once. So we will check whether it is called one time. And also we can check whether this method, okay, so whether this HTTP get call is triggered by passing this URL or not. You can also expect that. Expect HTTP client spy dot get dot to have been called with, okay, then pass the URL which we have mentioned here. Okay, so here let's save it. Here we are testing two things. One is in this method the HTTP get call is getting triggered or not. Another thing is whether this get call is passed with this URL or not. So these are the two things we are testing. Now we will run our test case. We will run our test case in the watch mode. Okay, npm run test watch. If you have not seen our first videos, please take a look. We have mentioned all the scripts inside the package.json. Here, this is test watch. This is running just in the watch flag. Okay, all our test cases has been passed. Whatever we have defined in the fake service, it got passed. So we have two test cases there. Now let's see version 2 of getCall. Let me create a method for that. It's same as this method, but we are going to modify little changes. So here instead of v1, it should be v2. So here after getting the response, we are going to use pipe from the observable, and I'm going to use the tap operator as well. So here you will be logging all the data into your logging server if needed, or whatever the things you are going to do, you can do it here. I'm going to just log it. Data fetched. Here it's saying like data is declared, we have not used. So let's also print the data. Now see, the data is implicitly has any type. If you know the type of response you get from the JSON, then you can mention the type here. Otherwise, mention it any. It's always better to use the type that JSON response, not any. Okay, and let's import the tap operator as from the RxJS. So now we will catch the error as well. Catch error. This is also from RxJS. Make sure you import catch error observable tap from RxJS. and this dot will create a method to handle the error. Handle error. So it's we are saying it's a fail to fetch data. Okay, we don't have the handle error method created. Okay, now let's create the handle error method. I have the codes are already created, so I'm just copy pasted it here to save the time. Let's import the HTTP error response from the Angular common HTTP. So in your case, this handle error method will be completely different based on your project. So here I'm just showing if it is getting failed, the API call gets failed, what we are how we are handling the error. So we are just triggering the handle error method, and here we are throwing the error with the operation and all those messages. Okay, just leave about this. So here after getting the response, we are using the pipe operator and we are using tap and catch error. So let's see how to test all this. Okay, so this is the version 2 of the get call. Let's save this. So this is same as this one. Let's copy paste this one. Okay, now this will be v2. We'll mention everything as the same response and the same URL and the same call, HTTP get call, and here instead of v1 it's a v2. Okay, so here we are going to test whether the response what we are passed to mock for the get call, is it the same one which this method is responding or not. For that we need to subscribe to that. So this is, since this is an observable response type, we have to use this dot subscribe. Okay, so if you subscribe to observable response, there will be two things here. There will be two things. One, the first case is if the test is getting passed, and the another case is if the test is getting failed. So if it is getting passed, first we need to use next, and then what is the data it returns. Okay, so if the API call gets passed for the get data v2, then it comes into this block. We will expect the data which comes from here is equal to the data we have mentioned here, the response. This is the expected response. Since we have mocked the HTTP client get call with this response, then if we call this one and if we subscribe to that, we will get this response. That is our expectation. And since this is of asynchronous call, we should wrap it with done. Here you have to use a done and done. Okay, so this makes it as an asynchronous test call. This will wait for the data to respond. Whenever you have a asynchronous code in your application, just like this one, because here we are making the get call and it goes to the server, and we are not sure when the server returns the response. It may take some milliseconds to seconds for that. So JEST needs to know when the code testing has been completed before it can move to another test. So for that, to let the JEST aware of it is as an asynchronous call, we should not use an empty parameters like here. We should use a single argument as done. So JEST will wait until the done callback is called before finishing the test. So here we are making the done callback. So here we are passing the done as an argument and we are making the call here. So JEST will wait until this call is getting triggered. So if you miss to call this one, JEST will fail with the timeout error, which means it doesn't know when the response comes to the, which means it doesn't know when. Here, if you miss to do this callback, the done one, then the test doesn't know when the system Here, if you miss to call this callback, done callback, then the test doesn't know when the response comes. So it will fail with a timeout error. So always make sure if you are using asynchronous, then call with a callback done. Let's save this one. And if it is error case, now for the error, we will just do the console.log. Let's save this. Okay, so here what we are doing is we are triggering the get call and subscribe to the response. Since it is of observable type, so we have to do the dot subscribe. Then it returns with the two properties, one with the next and another one with the error. So if it is success case, in our case it is success. We are returning a successful response. So it obviously enters into this mode. So it comes with this data, and with this data we are checking whatever we have passed, that is coming here or not, because this is how it works. Okay, so this is the get call. Once this get call happen, since we have mocked this get call with to respond this value, so it will come here, and we are checking whether whatever we have mocked, that is the response, it's coming here or not, and we are doing the callback. Since we have passed done as an argument to mention that it's an asynchronous code, then we have to do the callback of done. And here in the error, we are just logging it. But in our case, it will never go to here, because our case will get passed here itself. So this is a success scenario. Here if you see, we have a console.log data fetched. It's a data fetched, and whatever the data we have passed, it's printed here. So this is what we have logging it here. So whatever the data we are passing there, it's came here, and we are printing the data. Console.log data fetch. So that is what it is printed in the console. So okay, so we have the test case passed. This is the successful scenario. Now let's see the error scenario. So let's copy this one. Okay, so we are going to create an error scenario now. So here we are going to test whether it is throwing the error or not. So so here should get data v2 throw error. So this is what is the test case for this. So here we are going to check this scenario. Previously we have covered this line. Now we will cover this line, whether it is triggering this method or not. So our test will cover this method. So the response we will have to create is the error response. Const error response new HTTP error response. And we'll mention what is the error. It's a test 404 error. So we are going to check 404 error. And we'll have the status 404 and the status text as not found. So these are the properties defined in the HTTP response. If you see here, it has the error, status text and status. So that is what we have defined, and we have mentioned some values for that. So now we have the error response created. So this is what we are going to throw it now. So whenever we mock this one, this is for the successful response. For the error response, we have to use throw error operator from the RxJS. So now this will throw error response. Make sure it is imported from the RxJS. Here we could see that the throw error now got deprecated. So instead we have to do a newer version. So here instead pass factory functions to the throw error. So we will do that way. Just make it as an function, factory function. Okay, now we have mocked the error response. Now let's call to this one. Here we are not going to test this scenario because we have already covered this scenario in another test case. So this is, we are testing for the error scenario. So here we will just do the console.log data. Okay, same as what we have done for the error previously, since it is never going to trigger this call. So here once the error comes, okay, let's wrap it in a parenthesis. So here we will expect error dot message. Okay, it's a property from the error. Okay, that message we are checking whether it contains to contain the message we have mentioned it here or not. So here in this case we are expecting this error message contains the error we have mentioned or not. Okay, then since it is an asynchronous call, we have to do the callback. Done. Let's save it. Okay, so all our test case has been passed and we have the error has printed as well. So if you see, we have the test cases has been passed. So this is the error got printed here. So you don't need to worry. So this was the error which we are printing it. So now we have covered all these methods we have mentioned, the get call and the get version 2. And here, since we have covered this catch error, it automatically triggers this method as well, and this one also getting covered there. Now let's see the post call. For that, we will create a method with post call. Here it will be same as this one. Instead of get data, let's say it as a post data. Instead of get call, it will be the post call. So here we need to pass some data. Okay, so what is that data? So we'll pass that data here. So okay, so whatever the data comes here, it passes here. So this is the post call. So this is the simple post call. We will also pass some headers. Const HTTP options. We'll pass a headers. Headers new. It's of type HTTP headers. Let's say content type. Application JSON. Okay, so this will pass it here. HTTP options. Let's save this code. So here we have created a simple post call and it's triggering this URL and passing the data which we are passing to this method, and we have added some headers. So you can add all your headers here with the comma separated, authorization, the tokens, everything. Now we will test this method. Now we will create an it for post call. Post it should test post data b1. So here we need to pass a value to this method. So we have to pass the data to this method, and there will be some response, expected response for this call, and the URL. So we need to define all these three. Let's say the command as testing. So this is what we are passing to that method, and let's say the expected response is Techopsworld, and the URL we can use the same URL. Okay, in your case the URL will be different. I'm just showing a demo here. Okay, here we have all the URLs, everything is ready, right? So now let's spy the post call. So still now we have only get call defined in our spec file, but we have the post call as well. Now we need to add the post entry as well here in the spy. Post just.fn. So now we have added the post as well. Now we will mock the HTTP client post just.spy on HTTP client spy, post. So whatever the methods you have to add each entries here, and then you need to mock all those things. If you are using update or delete, do the same thing what we are doing for the get and post call. Here mock return value of response. So it's same as this previous one. We are just marking the response as observable. Now let's trigger the method service.post data v1. So whatever the methods we have defined in the service, it's all listed here. We can select one, and we need to pass the argument. So we are passing command. So this will be the payload which we are going to send it to the server. So now we will expect this HTTP client spy dot post call is getting triggered or not. Let's see the same one to be called times 1. Okay, let's save it. So you can expect whichever scenarios you wanted to expect, but this is how we have to trigger this method. Okay, our test cases has been passed. So the post call got succeeded. So this is how you test a post HTTP call. Now let's see the coverages. Till now whatever we have covered for this, for all these methods. Let's stop this watch mode. Let's generate a coverage, npm run test :coverage. So this is a script we have defined in our package.json. If you have not seen our configuration for Angular video, please take a look. Our coverage report got generated. Let's open the coverage report. So here we have the coverage report. Let's open this folder in the Explorer. So here is the services we have created. Okay, so we have covered the get call and the get version 2 and the post data 1, and here we have covered these scenarios as well. So we could see all our functions got tested. we have a 100% coverage in our line. So this is how you test services in Angular project using JEST. Now in this chapter we will see how to test Angular component using JEST. For that, first let us create a component. Ng generate component data. So I am creating a component named data. You can name it anything, or else you can use your own component. Okay, we have the component has been created here. This component also contains a spec file. It has the default codes in it, and this component is completely blank. So we will create a method and we will also inject some services, and we will see how to test all these things in this component using JEST. First, let me inject a service which we have created in our last chapter. Private fake service. Make sure you are importing the fake service here. And I am going to create a method. This dot service data. So here we are calling the service data method inside the ng on init. So here is the real method. So inside this method we will make a fake service call. This dot fake service dot get data v1. So here this method returns an observable. If you see here, it's returning an observable. Now we will subscribe to this observable dot subscribe, and since we are running on latest Angular, we have to do like this. We have to add the 3 properties next, and this is a success case. If the data comes, what we are going to do in this case, and the next would be error. So on error, what we are going to do? On successful completion, complete. Okay, so this is the template. So in each scenario we will test. If it is success, what happens in the data, and if it is error, what we are getting, and in the complete case as well. So for the success case, we will set this data into a variable. For that, I will create a variable service data, colon any, and then we will also add error message. Okay, so here once we get the data, we are going to assign it to the service data, and we will see how to test. This service data contains the data, it comes from this. And here in the error message, the error will set it to this dot error message equal to error dot status text property present in this error. So we will see how what is the status text property from this as well. And in the complete scenario, we will add console.log finished. Okay, so we have written all the 3 scenarios. We have subscribed the observable response from the service. Let's save it. Okay, now we will test this component. Okay, by default, this is the basic template created by the Angular. So it doesn't have any dependency injections added. We have added the fake service as dependency. We need to import fake service here. First, let us create a mock for the fake service. Let fake service mock colon any. Since I have given colon any, I have the control of whatever the methods I wanted to define. I can add it at the entry here. So here we need to define what are the methods present in the fake service. So here we are using only get data v1. So we need to define only that method. So let us define that fake service mock equal to getData v1 method, and we will use a JEST mock for that, jest.fn. So now we have mocked the fake service and the method getData v1. The fake service might contain lot of methods, but whatever the methods we are using inside this component only should be mocked here, since we have mentioned it as any. Now we will add it in the providers. So in the provide, add the fake service. Here instead of the real fake service, we are going to use this value. So let us type as use value fake service mark. Here if you see this, I am mentioning it as use value, not use class, since it is a value for this fake service mock. It is not a class, we have not defined any class for that. We have defined a value. So make sure you are using use value. If you are creating any class, then at the time you can mention use class. Okay, let's save this. So now we will create our first test case. It should return service data. So return service data. Actually we are setting the service data, so it should be set. Okay, so here we will add the expected response. Const expected response equal to name. I'll add my name Vijay Selvam. So we are going to expect this response as part of this get call, the fake service call. First we will mock the fake service. Just dot spy on fake service mock and the name of the method which we are going to use. So we are going to mock this one, dot mock return value, and this should be of type observable. So let's add a operator OF and I import it from the RxJS. Make sure it is imported from the RxJS. And we'll add the expected response. Okay, so now we have mocked the response. So here by default Angular triggers the fixture.detect changes in the before each of every test case, but we don't want this to be triggered in each case. We'll remove it from here. Instead we will add it from here. Okay, so only on this test case it has to detect the fixture.detect changes. It has to trigger the fixture.detect changes. If it triggers fixture.detect changes, what happens? If you see here, this ng on init will get triggered. So inside the ng on init we are calling service data method. So then this method will get triggered. So then here inside this method we are calling fake service.getData v1. So again this will get triggered. So this is how the trigger goes. But you can also directly trigger this method get service data without using fixture.detect changes by calling component.get service data. But since we are triggering it from the ng on init, we have to trigger it from here only. Now we will expect component dot service data. Since we have defined the service data as public, so by default if you define any variable, that will be considered as public. If you define it as a private, then we will not be able to access this variable inside this spec component. If you see here, we are getting an error. Service data is private, only accessible within the data component. It will not be accessible here. So we have to make sure it is of type public. Okay, now we will expect here we will expect the name alone. Name, we'll check dot to be this name, expected response dot name. So this is what we are going to test here. Let's save this. So let's run this application in watch mode, the test cases. npm run test :watch. This will trigger a script written in the package.json. Test :watch. This will execute a jest in watch mode. Okay, now we have our test cases has been passed, and we also got finished has been executed. Since this case is a success case, the finish will get triggered by default. Now let's cover the error scenario for this. Let's create an it case for that. It should get service data, set error message. So here we will set the error response, const error response equal to new http error response. And we'll have the properties, update all the properties, test 404 error, status, (404). Actually, if you see, these are the properties defined by the HTTP error response, error, status, status text. So we are passing a value for that. But in your case, these errors will be passed by the backend API. So the API will return the error response. So now we will mock the call. This one we have to set this with the error response, but we have to throw the error. Here this one is deprecated. If you see throw error, then the newest way is to add this format. It should be written as a function. Okay, now we could see the deprecation has been removed. Now let's trigger this method. See, we have seen the way how to trigger it via ng-on-init. Now let's see how to trigger it directly calling this component, get service data. Component dot get service data. Now we will expect this error message is set or not. Expect component dot error message dot to be not found. Let's save it. Okay, we could see the test got passed. If you change it to dot not, if you say this will not come, then it will throw error because this was the statistics we have mentioned here. Yes, as expected, the test got failed. See here it has mentioned the not as defined in before the not found. So we have to change it to be not found. Remove the not, then the test case will get passed. Okay, now we have seen how to test a service call from the component. We have seen all the three scenarios, the next, error, and all the complete as well. So this is how you test services injected into any component. In this chapter, we will see how to cover branches in Angular using JEST. I have written a sample code. So I have created a method named setGreeting. This will set the greetings value based on the service data and the time. So here, once we get the service data, if it is success, I am triggering the setGreeting method. And this in turn set the values for the greetings. So we will see how to test and cover the branches for this. Let's jump in. We will copy this code since we have already covered the service data. So here we have expected name as a response. We will also add time. Just assume this is a login time. Say it as 12. Here we will remove this one. Now here we can also trigger this service data either by using fixture.detectChanges or like this. So let's keep it as fixture.detectChanges. Okay, so once it is triggered this method, we have set the observable values as success values. So then it will come to this, then it will automatically trigger this method. So let's check the value which set for the greeting is good day or not. So for that, let's see expect component dot greeting dot to be good day. So whatever the text present here, we'll use the same. So here this will only cover this branch because the time we have set is 12. So it does not satisfy this condition. So it has satisfied only this condition. So only we are covering this branch. Let's save this code. Let's run this application in the watch mode. npm run test:watch. I'm running test in watch mode for this application. So here we will change this name to should greeting set good day. So this is the expectation for this one. We will also add another scenarios. Okay, so what if it is 9 and what if it is 22, and this should be the values good morning, that is if it is less than 10. So in this case it should be good morning, and in the last case it should be good evening. Okay, so now we have covered all the scenarios. So if the time is less than 10, this should cover this branch. If the time is less than 20, it should cover this branch. If none of these matches, it should cover this branch. This is how we are covering this one. But you can also trigger this method separately. Instead of calling this method and setting the values, you can directly trigger this method But this method is also checking the value for the service data. So before triggering this method, you should set the value for the service data. Since the service data is a public property, you can also set it directly without calling this method. But the correct approach is you should trigger this method, and this method should trigger this set greeting, and it should also have the service data. So you don't need to set the service data, and you don't need to trigger it. It all's in the process. Okay, our test cases has got passed. We will save this one for the remaining scenarios for good morning and good evening. Okay, we could see our test cases has got passed. Let's stop the watch mode. Okay, so now we have covered all the scenarios. Let's check the coverage report. npm run test coverage. This will execute the script in the package.json what we have mentioned during our configuration. Our coverage report got generated. See here for our component data.component.ts, we could see the statement is 100% coverage, and the branch is 100%, and the functions 100%, and lines also 100%. You can see all our files got 100% coverage. So our application is completely unit tested. Let's see the coverage report in the browser. So you can open the coverage and open the index.html. So here we can see all our files 100% coverage. All the things are in the green. 100% statements, 100% branches, 100% functions, and 100% lines. So we'll see the data component which we have recently coded. Here we can see it is fully covered. In this chapter, we are going to see how to cover unit test cases coverage for asset timeout for asynchronous functionalities. Let's jump in. So first, let us create a component named asynchronous. ng generate component asynchronous. Yes, we can see the asynchronous component has been created. Let's open it up. Let's write some asynchronous coding. First, let me create a variable. Have a variable named timeout response, and the value set it to test, and we'll create a function with the timeout. So here I have the basic set timeout inside a function, and after 1000 milliseconds, this will set the value for the timeout response to set timeout check. So before that, it will be test. So now let's see how to test this timeout in JEST. Let's save this code. So here inside this spec component, so we will see this test case should set timeout response to this value, set timeout check. So we will check this one. So in order to use timers in JEST, we have to use a fake timers, and we have to mock them globally across this component. So we will do that. First, let us use fake timers. JEST dot use fake timers, and we will also mock the value JEST dot spy on global set timeout. Okay, so we have set timeout in our component that we have mocked it globally across this component. Now let's trigger this method component dot check set timeout. Now here, if you trigger this one, we will see what the values it shows. So we'll check expect component dot timeout response dot not to be this value. Okay, so here what happening? when we trigger this method, it should set the value to set timeout check, right? But we are saying it as it not to be, because whenever we trigger this method, it will not contain the value of this set timeout check, because it has to wait 1000 milliseconds, then after that only will call this. So and before that it will contain the value of test. Let's save this. So at this point we can also make the jest to execute the 1000 milliseconds jest dot advance timers by time 1000. So this will execute 1000 milliseconds for us. Then now we will expect this value to be equal to set timeout check. We'll remove this not now. So we have the two expect conditions here. One is before the timers complete and after the timer runs. So these are the values we are testing it now. And we also can check how many times the test timeout has been run. Like expect set timeout dot to have been called times 1. So at this time we have triggered only one times this method, so it should call the set timeout only once. So for this test case, let's save this. So here instead of using advance timers by time 1000 millisecond, here this is the time it has mentioned 1000 milliseconds. So for that you can directly set 1000 milliseconds. But if you are not sure how much time it will take, then you can use another option like this one, just dot run all timers. So if you use any one of these option, it will work. Okay, let us comment this one. Let us use the advanced timers alone. Let's save it. Let's run our test cases. npm run test : watch. Okay, all our test cases has got passed. We will see the coverage report for this. npm run test : coverage. We could see the test report showing 100% unit test cases coverage. Now let us see that in the Chrome browser. Let's open this index.html in Chrome. So here we can see the set timeout check has been 100% covered. So this component is completely 100% covered.